Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great pro session here with Jonathan Cortizo. We're going to be going through how to start your own video production company. And John is someone who grew up in Canton, Massachusetts, learned filmmaking under Ed McDonough at Canton High School from 2003 to 2007. He worked as a union camera assistant in New York from 2011 to 2017, currently works as a freelance cinematographer in Brooklyn, New York, and specializes in documentary production and fashion videos. You can see his work at thecortizos.com. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here with us. We're happy to have you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I can get right into it unless anyone objects. I'll start sharing my screen.
Yeah, we'll have you go through it, and
Okay.
I am going to be watching for questions along the way, but otherwise you just go ahead and have at it. Share your resources with us. Thank you.
Great. So let's full screen this here. Everyone's doing well. So yeah, my name is John Cortizo. I attended STN in 2007, if I remember correctly, with Ed McDonough as part of the, I think the New England chapter is what they called us back then. So I'm here in New York, and I'm excited to share how I was able to make a living doing this stuff. So I'll get into basically, if you don't remember anything else from this, it is that there is no one way to start a video production company if this is what you want to do. So I'll share with you how I ended up where I am, and hopefully you can take some things that are useful from this and apply it to your own journey. And to clarify what a video production company is in the context of this presentation, it's a company that provides video services. So you can make a video production company that caters to corporate clients. You can make one that caters to fashion magazines. You can make one that just makes documentaries for media outlets. I happen to work at a video production company that caters to fashion magazines and happens to make short documentaries for media outlets that look for that kind of thing. So anyway, let's get into it. So to provide you with a timeline, I was born in 1989, and it all started as kind of just a fun thing to do. And I think that's important to remember, is that if it's just a fun thing to do, eventually you'll get somewhere. You might not get exactly where you want to be, but you'll probably get somewhere that's pretty satisfying. I think that's what happened to me, because it doesn't feel like work along the way. So in 1994, I started shooting still photos with this camera up here. It was a 110 millimeter still film camera. And it was just like a toy. I started using still cameras like this 110 millimeter one here and this 35 millimeter point and shoot. Oops, go back here. And throughout my childhood, it was just kind of a game. It was just a fun thing to do. And throughout my childhood, I picked up my dad's Canon AE1 and learned how to shoot manual settings on a film camera. I picked up my dad's video camera. It was a VHS. It was a full-size VHS camcorder, and just shot fun things around the house. Shot home movies and shot little things with my friends, and just developed an instinct for how to shoot and how to edit. So I did all that up until about 2001. 2001, I got into the 7th grade, and the camcorder, this big one here, the VHS one that my dad had, broke. So I had to buy my own. So I mowed lawns and caddied and didn't eat lunch. I don't recommend this, but didn't eat lunch a lot and just saved the lunch money. And then over the course of a year was able to buy a camcorder and use that from 7th grade through end of high school. And again, it was always just a game. It was just something fun to do, and got a lot of hours of experience just playing with these cameras. Got to high school in 2003, where I met my TV production teacher, Mr. McDonough, and learned, how to edit on a nonlinear system. It was Final Cut 7 back then. Premiere wasn't really, in vogue just yet. So it was Final Cut 7. I learned Final Cut 7 from 2003 to 2007. Went to STN, really enjoyed this stuff, and learned that if you go to a film school, you could give yourself a chance at getting a job at doing this stuff. So I tried getting into Emerson, but was turned down. This was 2007. So I went to a school that was next door called Suffolk, and went there my freshman year, and basically wanted to be as close to Emerson as possible because I wanted to give it another shot the year after that. So while this is happening, this is when I think the origins really start to happen on the business side, is that going into my sophomore year of college, I applied to get into Emerson College again, didn't know if I'd get in. As that's happening, I started working as a production assistant on a movie called Surrogates. I'm living in Boston at the time, and at that time, Massachusetts had developed a tax break for feature films. So you had a big influx of movies shooting in the Boston area, and they all needed production assistants. And fortunately, someone who had gone to Canton High School years before was introduced to me through Mr. McDonough, and she was able to get me on as a production assistant on Surrogates. It was a Bruce Willis movie. It's up here somewhere. Right, there it is. It was not very good, but it gave me a lot of experience. It taught me the language of film, which is the big takeaway, I think, of working as a PA, learning what a gaffer is and all the lingo. It taught me basically how to respect the hierarchy also. When you start out, you're kind of at the bottom, and if you're shooting in high school or college, you're used to being the director or producer or something like that. And you learn that when you get out, there are folks who are much older than you, and the way to move up is to respect them and to learn from them. So that was definitely a reality check, because everyone was ranked above me. So I just had to stay humble and learn from them as much as I could. And it wasn't easy, but something I was able to do in 2008. So as this is happening, this is between freshman and sophomore year, I reapplied to Emerson and then got in after I was waitlisted and transferred in going into my sophomore year. So I'm going to film school at this point. Suffolk was like a liberal arts school, didn't really have a film program. So I'm going to film school, making creative stuff. And then during the summers, I'm working as a PA on movies that are filming in Boston. And I'm getting these connections through connections I had made on Surrogates, which is an important takeaway. Like the moment you get your first PA job, you want to make sure that you are courteous to the people around you and you maintain those connections, because if you can do that, those connections will lead to other jobs. And if you don't, there's a good chance your first PA job could be your last one. So, I'm fortunate to the following year get on another bad movie. It was a Brendan Fraser movie called Furry Vengeance, about a real estate agent who tries to build a mall in the woods and he's attacked by animals. At the time, it opened as the worst ranked movie on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it opened at 2%, so record-setting movie. And let's see. Yeah, so I'm still learning, still meeting people. That happens. I go into my junior year, work on The Amazing Race as a transportation coordinator, and then in 2011, graduate from Emerson College. And at this point, I was able to build up a pretty solid network of contacts from these shows and movies. So this is when, I always had the dream of starting a production company. I think I probably developed that in high school, but didn't really know how to do that yet. At this point, I'm just generating experience, trying to figure out what the business even looks like. 2011, I graduate from college, and I start to work on The Amazing Race for a season, and then I go to New York and I work on The Good Wife for 3 seasons. I start as a camera PA, season 3. I join Local 600, which is the camera union. And then I become a union camera assistant for several years after that. While this is happening, I also work a season as a transportation coordinator on The Amazing Race in 2012. So I joined the 600, Local 600 union, and then become a transportation coordinator right after that, even though it has nothing to do with camera. At this point, I'm just taking whatever job I can get and saying yes to whoever remembers me and trying to learn as much as I can about as many different aspects of the business as I possibly can. Uh, and I'm still not getting hired to do any sort of creative work yet. I have no idea how to attain those jobs. It's a big mystery to become like someone that shoots or edits. I have no clue how that works. So I'm still trying to just figure things out. At this point, I'm probably 23 years old, a year after a year out of college. So I continue working on The Good Wife from 2012 to 2014. 3 years after college, so I'm about 25 at that point. Still haven't been paid to do anything creative yet, and but I still have the dream and the desire to have my own video production company and get my own videos and films and things like that. So as I'm working on The Good Wife, I'm getting to realize that it just doesn't happen on its own. You've got to, make your own stuff and make connections and get people to realize you have the capacity to do creative work and figure out a way to get people to hire you. So I decided to take a risk in 2014. I leave The Good Wife and I buy a whole bunch of video gear, and I decide, I'm in New York City. I'm just going to start my own video production company. I've got a resume with a bunch of well-known shows and movies on it. I know how to do this stuff creatively. So let's just buy a whole bunch of gear and see if we can support myself just shooting and editing and doing the creative work. I would say that the risk taking is necessary. How I took that risk, I would advise against, because what I did was I basically spent thousands of dollars on gear. And this is the gear that I bought at the time. It was pretty simple. It was just like a DSLR, a glide cam, some basic lights and sound, but still a lot of money. And I didn't have any clientele when I did that. So I basically emptied out my bank account and had a bunch of gear, but no one knew I existed. And I didn't really have very much to show. Like, I didn't have some huge portfolio that proved I knew how to do this stuff. So I basically just sat around emailing people, and no one gave me the time of day to, why should they? No one's going to pay you to do a job you haven't done before. So at that point, I realized I have to build up a portfolio and get my name out there as someone who can shoot and edit and produce videos before anyone's going to hire me to do that for pay. So I started working for free 2014, and I'm not making money. And rent is like $1,500 a month in New York City, and this is 2014. So I'm burning through my savings, and then after that, I got no clients, and then I get mononucleosis, so I'm bedridden for a month. And even if I wanted to work, like I applied to work as a waiter to offset the money I wasn't working, and I couldn't do it because I got mono. So I was bedridden and couldn't cook, couldn't go out and get food. Like, I could hardly breathe. Went to the ER. It was really bad. Like, I couldn't breathe. My tonsils got the size of golf balls, and it was really scary. Went to the ER, and I had to move out of my apartment. I told my roommate that I couldn't afford to stay there, and ended up moving back into my grandfather's living room in 2014. So this is 3 years after college. And the whole plan of starting my own video production company has failed at this point. And it was really tough because up to that point, nothing I had done creatively had really succeeded. Like, I tried making a short film several times right after college, and that failed because I didn't know what I was really doing. I made the budget too big and the scope of it too big. So it was a lot of failure on the creative end for like the first 3 years after college. So I took a minute and thought, okay, what if I go back to work, not full time, part time? It's called day playing. It's when you work every now and then on TV shows when they need extra crew members. What if I day play like 3 days a week and then simultaneously continue to try and develop new business with this video production company? So that's what I ended up doing. And that's when things start to work out a little bit better. So from 2014 to 2017, I'm day playing on TV shows with other camera assistants who I met on Good Wife. So I started day playing on Shades of Blue and Elementary and The Americans and a bunch of other shows. And at the same time, I'm emailing more established video production companies in New York, and I'm offering myself as someone who can shoot and edit for them. So paying my bills with the AC work that I really don't like. I really don't like the studio system and how it operates. And learning how the more creative video production companies in New York work by working as someone that shoots and edits. So this is happening from 2014 to about 2017. 2016, and I made a point of this. I got married, and the person I married is a video producer. And I would say that is really when the possibility of, working as a video production company owner, shooter editor became a reality. Because once Aaron and I started sharing the company, suddenly it wasn't just me trying to do everything. It was Aaron who's really good at the business side and developing new business and doing the accounting and things like that. She could take care of all that, and I could take care of, building up our reel and learning how to shoot and edit better. And suddenly we were, dividing and conquering, so to speak. And that's when things started to take off. So I'm not saying you have to necessarily marry your business partner, but if you can manage to find someone who can share the weight of, the dream with you, it becomes much more of a reality. So that happens in 2016. In 2017, I take one more, sort of full-time stint on a show. I worked on season 3 of Shades of Blue for like 3 or 4 episodes. And then after that, that's when I start to work more as someone operating out of our own video production company more than a freelance camera assistant. It's at that time that, we're generating a little more income. We can start to get our hands on more professional gear. So we're not just shooting, the 60D anymore. We're shooting Canon cinema cameras and getting my hands on the more professional gear. I'm learning things. I'm learning tools. I'm learning how to use different scopes and how to grade log footage and all that. So your skills go up and your value increases on set and in post-production. So people take note of that, and they're more likely to share your name, and it snowballs. So at that point, the production company I had was just my name, and we changed it to thecortizos.com, which is me and Aaron. We both share the last name, Cortizo. And that the success of that website was way better than anything I had ever tried to do on my own. So 2018 to 2020, we're effectively working full-time as freelancers out of under the name the Cortizos. Sometimes companies are hiring our LLC to take care of all the video production for them. Sometimes more established companies are hiring us to work under their name. But it's at this point that we're getting hired as a creative video partnership. And we're doing what we want to do, which is really cool. And then just like ACing, you make a connection, and then that connection leads to other connections if you do a good job and are respectful. And it leads to all these other brands you see on the right here. We're also learning how to find jobs online through companies like Story Hunter and film production job groups on Facebook. There's quite a bit of those out there. We've made a connection on Story Hunter that led to a ton of work. It was just one tiny job that led to a bunch of others. At this point, for all you camera nerds out there, we pick up our first Red camera, which It's a fancy camera. You don't need it, but as someone that really liked shooting, it was something I really wanted to have and work with. So this is 2019, so that's about 8 years after college. So you don't necessarily need the best tools right out of the gate. You can take your time. It took me about 8 years before I finally got my hands on the camera I really wanted to have and work with. Um, Last year, things are going well. The pandemic happens, and work stops suddenly. It was going great until February of last year, and then we had nothing aside from maybe one shoot from end of February through Labor Day, and it was kind of like a flashback to 2014 when I lost my apartment. Um, we didn't know if we'd be able to continue doing this, and it required a lot of patience and thinking about backup plans. But fortunately, unemployment came through, and we had some savings, and we were able to stick it out. And then during Labor Day of 2020, it was like the floodgates opened, and all of the budget that our clients had for video production that they hadn't used because of the pandemic, they started using it after Labor Day because the numbers were low. The COVID numbers were low in New York, and the company was able to make roughly as much as it made the year before, which I would have told you would be impossible in the middle of the summer. So, even if you're doing well, there are things that are going to happen that are going to really dampen business and potentially put you out of it. But I do think it's important to remember that, if the economy slows down, it's likely to pick back up again, and not to give up and to try and find some way of making it work. Even if you've got to take a part-time job doing something else, I don't think there's any shame in taking another part-time job or going back to an old job to make whatever your dream job is work. So here we are now. It's 2021. It's the slow season again, as is usually the case around January and February. But, if history repeats itself, it'll get busy again come end of March, early April, and will likely work until the end of the year, hopefully. So that's where we are. This is me. That's Aaron. That's the gist of our presentation. So feel free to chime in if you have any questions. Let's see here.
Awesome. I'm going to speak up. I'm still keeping it on you. That's who we want to see, but thank you so much for that valuable information. Does anybody have a question? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. One thing that, well, not one, but a couple of things I really liked that you said, having a producer background myself, was how important, how important your reputation is, that you're taking just any job that you could. And I'm going to see if I can add myself so it doesn't seem so weird. So one thing I really like that you were saying, John, is about the reputation. And it's one thing to get your foot inside the castle walls, as I like to call it. That's what I was taught when I was starting, but it's up to you to perform, right? And it's not even the skill, it's more the personality and the confidence that you bring to the table, because when you're a PA, for sure, you haven't got it all. You haven't learned it all, but to just be willing to ask questions, humble yourself. I was always taught that a good PA never sits. And I just like that you really prioritize the character and the perseverance in somebody. You don't have to know yet. You could easily get in the door just with one phone call, and then it's up to you. Even if they were to get connected through you or me with a resume, it's up to that particular person to do the job. And once you get in, you also mentioned that you had the one job through Story Hunter, and it just kept going, because when you get inside and people like you, they tend to gather the same people. So thanks for sharing those tips. I also found them to be true. I have a question here from Tommy. If you could go back in time, what would you say to yourself when you had mono and everything felt like it wasn't possible? What would you say?
I would have said, Well, this is probably to be expected because you don't have any clients yet.
Yeah.
It was like, I think the myth I believed was that if you just go for it, it's going to happen. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people sometimes, but there's also like a reality factor, which is if you don't have people who know who you are and can look at what you've done in the past and know that if they give you X amount of dollars, they're going to spend it well,
Mhm.
it's going to hire you. So I think if I were to do it again in that moment when I had mono, I would have said that it makes sense that you don't have any money because no one knows who you are yet. I just didn't, that aspect of reality just hadn't hit me yet until years later. So but also at the same time, like you look at that time period, that was maybe a year. I mean, that's a year really isn't very long. It feels long in the moment, but a
Mhm.
year of not getting your business off the ground is a very short period of time.
Sure.
So I think
Yeah.
like when you're a kid, and you've never had that level of success yet, it
Mhm.
feels impossible. But as you start to get some years under your belt where things are going well, like a year of hardship really isn't that long, and you just
Sure.
gotta.
No, there's people that have worked years. I know even people in the STN family, board members or alumni have said, "Oh, you can't move to Hollywood without a job." They went and they spent time. But I have a different story where I got my job from my former teacher. I went to San Diego State, go Aztecs. And when I graduated, I had a good relationship with one professor who gave me 5 names. And he said, pursue these. And I got a job transcribing on The Apprentice with
Okay.
Martinet Productions, but I just went inside. I didn't want to work in post. So same thing you're saying is I just took a job that I didn't want to do. I wanted to be on set, but I took the job, and by doing good, it then opened doors for me because I was inside the castle walls. So somebody's wanting us to, Mr. Ed is wanting us to circle back on a good PA never sits. What are some other attributes of a PA that gets you noticed, John? Tell me a little bit about your story and networking to get the job. How do you stay in touch with that network? What tips do you have?
Yeah. So if I go back in time to 2006, which is about the time I met the contact I had at Paramount,
Mhm.
who graduated from my high school, um, I was connected to her via email, and she passed my name along to someone who was working on a movie in Boston, and he was able to get me on as a PA for one day. So I had basically a one day tryout to, basically impress the assistant director department, so they'd hire me again. And I think at the time I really didn't know how to be successful yet because I was 19. Um, but I was fortunate to have people around me who taught me that if you're just respectful and work hard and attentive, good things will happen. So I just did
Mhm.
that to the best of my ability, and that was enough to get me back on the job for like 40 more days. It was like
Yeah, that's huge.
there's a lot of days for someone who was an additional set PA. When
Yeah,
the core PAs were from Los Angeles,
yeah.
I was fortunate in that way. But I would say that now that I'm old enough where I'm hiring PAs, I can now answer that question, like what is good in a PA and what's annoying. And I
What
think,
is a PA? Could you just define that? Because you and I know, but
yeah. So a PA stands for production assistant, and effectively you're doing the lowest level work on a show or a video project, whatever it is. So you're getting
Mhm.
coffee for people, you're handing out maybe talent release forms if you're interviewing people on the street, if it's more of a documentary setting, you're keeping people from walking into the shot if it's a narrative film on location. So you're just doing the grunt work essentially.
Mhm.
Um, and now that I've hired PAs, I can say that the people who we really like, I think the first attribute is um, just showing up on time and doing the job. Um, and then I would say taking direction really well. I'm not saying that like if you hear something and you think there could be a better option, I think a good PA will say, okay, I can do this, but you could also do this and achieve the same result, but more efficiently. That's a great attribute. But I think PAs who just don't take direction well and don't like being told what to do, you know, the person hiring you will see that, and it becomes harder emotionally for the leader to ask you to do something. And that's not energy any leader wants to spend on a PA. They want to hire someone who's easy to work with, who elevates the vibe on set, doesn't bring it down with a negative attitude. So if your attitude's positive and you're humble and you take direction well, you'll work again. But if you're not, the truth is no one wants to hire someone to do the lowest level work who's also bringing down the vibe on set. So I would say your attitude is probably equally important as showing up on time and just doing what you're asked to do well.
That's so huge. I've hired several production assistants, even whether it's producing in Hollywood or running events at theme parks like Legoland and SeaWorld. And one of my key components, especially for STN kids wanting to start out, was I like people that are proactive. So at the beginning of the day, you may be given a task list, like start with the coffee, things like that. But when your list is done, don't sit. You don't sit and wait for the producer who's super busy or the production coordinator, anyone to come tell you what else to do. What's next? Use your brain, look around. And even just in referencing the coffee, I was always told it's not fun in the moment, and neither is making a sandwich, but make the best cup of coffee that anyone's ever had. And not only that, if you have the same crew, remember what they want, and tomorrow bring it to them black or with extra cream. Whatever you can do to go above and beyond, be recognized. We used to have control room directors that liked Cheetos or Rockstar, and so just remembering those things and having it ready goes a long way. Something else you mentioned is just tools, having tools. So I feel like right now people are able to use their own phones and editing in ways that they couldn't. You don't have to have a fancy camera. What are some other tools? Do people need a resume these days? What else can you equip them with if you're starting out and wanting to, what are the main components you need? I'm going to also mute myself and go back so we're just seeing you.
Yeah. So I think if you're starting out as a PA or a junior editor, or maybe a junior video shooter, having a website is really valuable, because I think when your name is passed along to a producer these days, the first thing they'll do is look you up. So they'll probably look at your website first, and if not your website, they'll look at your Instagram profile. So I think a website's really valuable because it can kind of be a one-stop shop for everything, and it can supply your resume as well as any work you've done. Like if you want to get into motion graphics, it can supply your portfolio there, or your lighting work if you want to be a lighting designer or something. So I think a website's really valuable. And I think having a PDF of your resume is also really valuable, because there are also producers who aren't going to want to necessarily see your creative work. If they just want you to get coffee, they just want to have a resume with your experience and contact info on file, so they can just pass it along their team. So I think those two things are probably the first two really essential business tools to have, is a website that contains all of your work and your contact info, as well as a PDF resume. And I think that if you are, and honestly, I think if you're in any aspect of film, learning just the very basic language of visual storytelling is invaluable. So I always recommend getting your hands on, a really affordable manual film camera that you can probably get on eBay for very little, or like an antique store or a yard sale, because it teaches you the language in that mechanical device, and it's tangible. You can see the lens on it, you can see the shutter speed, you can see the film gate itself, and the moment you learn like what shutter speed is, and just like what focal length is, and all the basic language, the moment you step on set and you hear people speaking in these terms, it's going to make sense, and it's going to give you way more confidence too. But if you can't afford, if you can't get your hands on a film camera, it's like $50. Your iPhone is great too. So if you get comfortable taking photos on your iPhone and you learn the difference between a wide, medium, tight, and extreme close-up, and learn how those all factor into a sequence, that will also, improve your confidence level on set when you hear people talking in those terms. So.
That's awesome. I know it's not easy and it's long hours, right? So tell me why, about just that commitment. Why would you want to sacrifice what you do, work those long hours? What is something you're proud of doing these days that makes it worth all that you're giving up?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I think I've encountered a lot of answers to that from different people I've worked with on TV shows and things. For me personally, it's always just a fun thing to do. And it goes back to just playing with my dad's cameras, at home as a little kid, taking photos and making little videos with my friends. Like, it's just a fun activity that I've always enjoyed. And the fact that I've gotten to do it professionally, and my eyes and body still work well enough where I can actually do it. Like, that's enough of a reward for me. There's the incentive to communicate with audiences too. So if you have a passion about something and you feel like you can use film as a vehicle to get at that, there's a huge reward in that also.
Yeah.
But I've encountered a bunch of motivations too. Like, a lot of people get into film, as a crew member because they happen to know someone there, and really anyone can learn the basics of just about any job on set, honestly. I mean, there is such a thing as talent, and there are folks who are better at certain things than others, but I really do think that any person who wants to learn how to be a grip or a camera assistant can learn how to do that. And sometimes people just land in these positions and they realize it's good pay and you have benefits. And if you have a family or just need to support yourself, you can do that doing this job. So I've also met people who are motivated by like the pipe dream of like making it big or whatever that means. People who might want to become a big director or producer or something like that. Or I've met people who do it because they want to become wealthy, which I think, if it's just that, it's probably going to be pretty miserable because it's hard.
It's got to be deeper than that.
Yeah, it's got to be deeper than that. I think that you could spend 30 or 40 years trying to get there, and you will. And if it's just about the big paycheck or like your name at the top of the credits at the end, it's going to be pretty disappointing. So
yeah. Well, that brings up a good point that I had to learn also, is just setting personal boundaries, because I was in reality and you can move quickly, and I was doing well, but then I started moving along with that same crew onto shows that I didn't want to put my name on. So I had to actually set standards for myself and say, if I don't want to tell my mom or my grandma that I'm working on this show, I'm not going to, and it doesn't matter what the pay is. And also, when you become available, you're available on Thanksgiving, you're available on Christmas. And at my BlackBerry back in the day, now I have an iPhone, but it would be going off. So have you found that to be true, that you have to kind of define where you want to go and what you're willing to sacrifice, and almost not be afraid to say no sometimes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think also, I didn't get into this in the presentation, but one of the reasons why I left seeing The Good Wife and big shows in general, it's not exclusive to The Good Wife, is back then, this is 2014, the culture of studio films and TV shows was really not good. And like what happened in 2017 was Me Too. Like, that just didn't surprise me at all. Like the level of disrespect in some of those stories that came out, because the downside of the studio system, from my perspective and my limited time of being there, was that I call it the holy trinity of studio film, which is money, power, prestige. And as long as the show or the movie's making money and it's generating prestige for the studio or the network, a lot was allowed to happen, whether it be ethical or not. People it was cool to like curse people out if it meant getting a better result.
And then
there was just a
everybody's
lot of disrespect.
afraid and nobody
Yeah,
speaks up.
yeah, 100%. And
Like it's okay.
yeah, oh, definitely. And you know, I had a hard time operating in that system and not, allowing that to like make me grumpier, and it definitely had a negative effect on me psychologically. So I felt like if I could step back and start my own company, I could set the
Yeah,
culture,
that's great.
but I think that a lot's I don't know what the culture's like, you know, how it's changed the last 7 years. I imagine it's gotten a little better based on how culture in general has changed. But yeah, it was a hard world to be in, especially when you're doing it 14 hours a day. I think, and I also think that to your point, like when people work from the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed in these taxing environments, and they realize that they're not going to have a life when work ends. It's like you work, you go to bed, you do it
No.
again. It's
Yeah,
like
you have
people
that
give up.
title and the money, but you don't have much else.
Yeah, much else. And I think people just become like almost like nihilistic on these long running shows.
Hmm.
Like they just, I don't know. It's really weird. And I think when, you're on a schedule that's dawn to dusk for months on end, and the only thing that matters is the result,
Hmm.
it really does tend to bring out I don't know, the worst in people at times. And I met some amazing people who are closer to me than family in some cases on these shows because you spend so much time with them. And I met great mentors. But I think if there's a younger generation watching this presentation right now who can work in the studio system, I would say it's much healthier for people to work reasonable hours than to work 14, 15 hours every day on set for months on end. And if you can change that, a lot of the negative behavior that was indicated by Me Too, that sort of broader culture of disrespect, I think a lot of that will drop quite a bit. Um, Not all of it, but I think a lot of it will.
Yeah, well, and I like how you're taking the reins into your own hands and saying, I wasn't okay with that, so I'm going to do my own thing. And you may sacrifice the big network and those names that everyone associates success with. But to me, at the end of the day, the success is your own fulfillment. And did I accomplish what I set out to accomplish? Am I proud of my work? Can I sleep at night? I mean, geez, there's plenty of times I've been in awful situations on set and it was brutal. And at least in reality, it's a contract job. So
Mhm.
I knew that I had an end in
Yeah.
sight. But when you don't, if you're in a network type position, it's scary. So I guess my point bouncing off yours would be to everybody that you're never stuck. There's always another option. You created another option for yourself by creating your own company, and anyone can do that. Don't ever feel like if I leave this job, I will never find another one. Don't believe that I'll be on some blacklist. You find your people, you believe in yourself, stay true to yourself, and you're going to find success. And if you feel like you have to stick with those people and you're miserable, it wasn't meant to be anyway. There's probably something else for you. So as we start to wrap it up, I just want to say, what is the thing you're most proud of? If you were to close your eyes and say, this is the moment, or this is why I do it. Is there like a certain show, a moment that stands out? Just share that with us.
Hmm. That's a good one. Most proud of? I don't know. I would say, I know I can tell you what has been, I think, what's given me the most gratitude, I think, is as time passes, you know, like I mentioned in the presentation, I was living with my grandfather for several years while I was trying to figure out this video production company thing. So I got to see what life is like, at the end of life, really. It was this last 5 years. And, over time, your body stops working and your eyes stop working. And, it hit me that, like, if your eyes work and your hands work and your body works and you can actually operate a camera and look through a lens and create
Mm.
images that way, like, that's a huge gift in itself. And then on top of that, I would say the other thing is, like, especially with documentary, you get to meet people and go places that you wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
And I think what I'm learning is that there's great power in social media to generate conversations that create change. The limitations of social media is that it's a very, like your cell phone's a really tiny screen that can only present so much information. I think for anyone to learn what life is like for someone else, you really got to hang out with them ideally and look at how they're living their life and see the factors that led to where they are and to try and understand that. And I think that's where positive change starts, is to just understand people. And documentary can do that. It can send you to those places and introduce you to people that you never thought you'd talk to before.
Sure.
So I think that's been,
Get out of
yeah,
your bubble and be open to change, be open to new people. It's fascinating what's out there.
yeah, absolutely. So I think those are probably the two things. Yeah.
Man, I'm so glad I got to be here with you today. And I know webinars are interesting because you can't see the people watching, but I assure you that they are. And we thank you for sharing your valuable resources with our STN family. This is recorded and we're going to share it for the weeks and months to come. So thanks again, John, for being here. And we definitely wish you the best out there.
No, thanks. Same for having me. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Yep. Bye.